What are we here to talk about today?
Well, let's see. I think we're both at a loss in general about what to talk about ever
As people.
right now. That said, I think, we've discussed there are plenty of podcasts talking about COVID, plenty of them, honestly, and I mean this sincerely, plenty talking about the Black Lives Matter protests, the details that are involved in that, and all the nuances and things that we should be learning about that. No one is signing up to get two more white guys to tell them about that, so we don't want to do that.
Yeah,
but
nor should they unsubscribe.
Yeah. But what we can do, and it felt like me and you kind of found this idea at the same time, I think, we wanted to talk about music as a lens through which to view so many of these things and a way to apply them when it comes to accepting and understanding when things need to happen in society and the things that are required to actually make them change. And through using the lens of music, we came up with these two seeming opposites, but really complementary ways of thinking about music, and honestly, the way that we already kind of apply them in the ways that they've impacted us, I think, over our lives. And so we have these kind of chunked up into introspection and direct action. And so the kind of two approaches, and you tell me what you think too, but I think the two approaches are, first, introspection is about the things that make us, when we're sitting and we're listening to music, that orient us towards the way that we want to think, the way that we want to feel, giving us a sense of, honestly, loving kindness towards other people, which, as you'll see, does not align one-to-one with soft or gentle music. That's in right. Any capacity. And so we align ourselves through introspection. We work on this inside of here, getting this right, because, wow, we've seen this year especially, a lot of people need some alignment in this general area.
Yeah, they need to Marie Kondo their souls.
Jeez, man. Yeah, none of you are sparking joy. Holy. So,
Karen.
So we have the introspection, and then we have the direct action portion of it, right? Because it doesn't matter, at least in practice, it doesn't matter how aligned we are in here if the systems that we contribute to produce the injustices and oppression that we're trying to align ourselves against.
Yeah.
And so the direct action is then about what are the things over our lives and what are the things now that really do motivate us to take direct action in one way or another. And we're seeing that play out a lot now. Especially, I mean, again, we're in Atlanta. Hopefully everyone knows that real clearly by this point. But, we are weeks into Black Lives Matter protests, and regardless of what popular media, regardless of political viewpoints, is covering, they're still ongoing. I was a part of a protest last weekend.
Yeah, literally daily.
Yeah, and so this is also a good opportunity for us to remind everybody, I think, through these songs, wow, this is not a new concept.
Yep.
This fight has been ongoing for a long time, and in ways that are honestly depressing, how specific the problem continues to be and how little has changed about it. But hopefully, I think our goal is to apply this type of music, talk about it, share it, and give people an opportunity to use one of these two kind of calibrating polarities to bring themselves into the alignment of where we are right now. Because everything's real confusing and everything is kind of really terrible. And to be able to just, okay, let me take a chunk of music and try to fix the part of me that's most disturbed or upset by the situation that we're in. I think that's the best way we can contribute.
It's very like Deepak Chopra-esque. Like, let's bring ourselves into alignment with the polarities of human energy. I mean, I don't want to start off on too gallows-y a note.
Yeah.
I think what we have loved about this shift to this format is trying to find musical vocabulary for the moment. Like music is how we make sense of the world and of our friendship and like the meaning of life. And so not to like get too soft and rosy. I think it was kind of a healing exercise to go through and think about some of these songs and find interesting new segues and hear how artists were processing their pain and their joy and their hope. And ultimately, like, there's still a question mark at the end of all of this with both of these playlists. But I hope what people will take away from these two is like any good narrative arc in an album, they kind of surge up toward hope and action orientation. In the case of sitting with yourself and learning about yourself and how you feel about all this stuff, and just learning to talk to yourself out loud. But then also figuring out, like, okay, it's just performative if I'm just sitting and thinking and I'm telling people that I'm doing that. So what am I going to do about it? How am I going to move the needle? What is the needle to be moved? How can I get more comfortable not saying the right thing, but expressing that I'm here to help? Like, I think all of those things that people are struggling with right now are embedded in all of these songs. So once again, I think artists kind of lead the way for us as humans. So,
hell yeah,
you want to get into it with the introspection one? I think so. For this one, we're gonna focus on the introspection half of things, and then we'll take a break, and then later we'll talk about the direct action songs. So let's talk about introspection, because it starts on a really interesting note.
Yeah,
like ostensibly, I think these started as the protest playlists for us, kind of.
Yeah,
and then it was like, well, that's like, let's not be too literal or whatever. And then when you come with a Coltrane song to start it, it was like, okay, we're gonna do a little bit of a different thing.
Classic us. So, first of all, live here in the studio, we're going to be working on shutting ourselves up a little bit faster so that this podcast doesn't become a 6-hour anthology about all the details.
Next on Time Life.
So that's why I stuck the hardest one to do that on right at the very top.
Yeah.
So our meditation songs have a few different aspects of them, but the first one here is the fourth movement in A Love Supreme by John Coltrane, Psalm, and we did an entire episode on this album.
Still one of our best, I think.
I'm so real proud of it. This is a deeply meaningful record to me. One of the reasons I chose this as kind of the first part of introspection is specifically because the Psalm motion or movement of that record was John Coltrane literally playing and translating a poem into music. And for me, this, speaking of not knowing when to say or how to say the right thing, being worried that you're either self-editing too much or not enough, and trying to think so deeply about whether you're speaking and acting in the right way. To me, Coltrane here does a great job of musically reminding me that there are languages that we just can't speak. It's okay to have feelings and understandings and honestly longings. You even have like this psalm that he's reciting musically is a petition. It's a request. It's emptying yourself in front of God and everybody. And so you're able to invoke not only the sense of, I don't know everything and I can't feel everything, and then also I want things that I can't express. And so being able to put that through a saxophone helps me remember always, to me, a centering moment. There's always going to be stuff I can't say. There's always going to be things I can't act out that I can't change and affect. And so this reminds me that it's okay to speak that way, in a way that only I'll ever understand in very quiet moments when I'm not worrying about whether anyone else actually understands what I'm saying.
And the thing that the first thought that I have when I think about A Love Supreme is that he was trying to glorify God through music. And it's, not like DC Talk, hand in the air, Christian rock type stuff. It's like trying to find the God in everything, right? Like seeing all as one, which is a theme that we've seen with some of the most profound records we've covered. Like you also see it with Björk. We saw the dark side of it with the Sunn record that we did cover, and the next song on this is a Sunn song. But I think it's really interesting that you chose to start with this song, because I thought of it as the like adjust your own mask before helping others thing. Mm-hmm. Like you can never be prepared to engage in the difficulties of being a human being who's trying to make things better with the species that very rarely gets it right, unless you are like actively working on actualizing yourself. And it's an imperfect process, but it's a beautiful one. There's a sublime thing in just saying, like, I know that I am small and what is out there is big. And it's so much bigger than me. I feel it with such astute clarity, but I still don't have the words for it. Like, the humility of the way that Coltrane approached this record, and specifically the song, I think speaks to the worldview that's important, especially for people who look like us, to have. It's just a good way to work through the world. And it's not always easy, right? The tendency is always to, like, be bigger and be more me, and to, like, yell so that you exist more clearly in the world. But it reminds me, like, these first three songs just remind me of a headline that I saw in an article a few years ago that was like, the purpose of life is to be a nobody. The purpose of life is to not exist. It's to blow out your own candle because it doesn't compare to the light of the sun. It's weird and counterintuitive, but I think you and I have both learned after, like, angsty, punky, and we'll get into the punk angst stuff later. But the stuff where it's like, I'm going to fight my way through it because, damn it, I do exist. This is kind of the opposite of that. And I think meditation was really good for both of us. And so it's good to hear it even without words from Coltrane.
Oh, yeah. And we'll get into some more of that I do not exist a little bit later, too. But yeah, so Coltrane into Ascension A by Sunn, stylized Sunn O. The most mentioned artist in any of our podcasts collectively. For me, this is
from the new record, from Pyroclast,
right?
Recorded like everything was straight to tape with Albini in Chicago, and this was just musically, it really pays off. Like, we talked about a really old Sunn record from like 15 years ago, but the new one, Pyroclast, is my favorite because it comes out of the dark and goes into the light. And this record that they made was tune-ups, was them, like, meditating and warming up, and that spirit really shines through in this one for sure.
Yeah, and so I think for both of us too, we have a form of, for lack of a better term, meditation that is exclusively extremely loud amplifiers.
Yeah. It's vibrations, right? It hits us at a cellular level.
Yeah. So listening to this one, regardless of whether it's after Coltrane or not, feels like I just, like, stepped onto a wireless charging pad a little bit. It's like, yeah.
I like that you sounded like Linda Belcher a little when you did that.
I would love to be a black metal Linda Belcher. That makes so much sense to me.
I'm black metal Gene then. Let's let that linger in the room for a second. Oh, not that long. Not that long. Jesus.
And then our last song, I think you put this one on the playlist. I'd love to hear that one from the block before we play him.
The third song kind of this grouping is Umi Says by Mos Def, from Black on Both Sides, which the first time I heard it was in a commercial, I think, about Kobe Bryant. I think it was a Nike commercial. And it was very, like,
that's right,
cut to the rhythm of it. And between that and the music video that was him, it was like extremely 99, 2000, cut between, like, time-lapse cityscapes and him in the studio, and it had like a meditative American Eagle commercial kind of vibe. But, like, I think the first two songs that you put on the playlist as a way of, like, clearing, like, scooping all the stuff out of yourself and emptying out to receive the world. And sonically, I was telling you right before we started recording, my favorite transition on this podcast, on this playlist, is the Sunn song going into the Mos song, because the Sunn drone is so big and full, and when you listen to it on headphones, it swallows your eardrums whole in the best way. And then it's tape, right? So the last thing you hear is them stopping the tape, and he goes, "Meow." And then it goes into the keys and sort of the vibiness of the Mos song. Yeah. And because it had kind of tuning forked my brain and spirit, I heard more space in the Mos Def song than I ever had before. So I was, like, ready to receive. the message of the Mos Def song, the hook is, my Umi said, shine your light on the world, shine your light for all to see. And it's him kind of struggling with his humanity and the fact that he doesn't get it right? That he's just a man, he makes mistakes, but he has these aspirations to do great for his family and for his community. And the song that I had like that growing up that my dad showed me was Simple Man by Leonard Skinner. And this is sort of a more enlightened version of that. But this is my favorite song for like reorienting myself to the work and just sort of having a mantra for being alive and what's important and what my priorities should be.
Awesome. All right, so we'll kick it off to those next 3 songs, and we'll come back and intro the next block of them.
Let's do it.
Awesome.